Good morning from wherever you are joining in from. My name is Dr. Oluremi Adewale. I am a healthcare professional in Canada with over 20 years of experience. I want to thank you for joining this series of 12 webinars related to COVID-19. I'm also the president of a registered non-for-profit organization called Women Focus Canada. It is dedicated to support women, and men are also welcome. I invite you to visit our website, womenfocuscanada.org, for more information. I am delighted to be your moderator for today's webinar, and my co-moderator is Rowena Power. First, I would like to recognize our three speakers. Dr. Leo Egbujibi is an interventional cardiologist, medical director, and Dr. Leo is joining us all the way from the United States of America. Thank you so much, Dr. Leo. We appreciate you. I would also like to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Montunrayo Adetola. He is a family physician and emergency room physician in Canada. Thank you, Dr. Adetola, for joining us. I'd like to recognize and welcome Mrs. Ebukun Ogunshina. She is a registered psychotherapist and a Christian counselor in Canada. Thank you, Mrs. Ogushina, for joining us. If you have registered for this, you will have received the detail of the speakers and their bios are there. So in the interest of time, I will not be reading their bio. But what I will say is that we've got seasoned professionals here with us today. COVID-19 has impacted life, and it has differently. So we encourage you to pay attention to your reactions today. We also encourage you to wait to the end of this webinar as individual speaker brings in unique perspective to the topic. The information that we are giving you today is not intended to substitute for professional and or medical advice. Please take care of yourself. The goal of this webinar is to learn about COVID-19, the prevention, intervention. What do you need to do to support yourself, to keep yourself safe, and to keep your family safe? Now is the time that we have been waiting for. It is my privilege to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Montunrayo. Please, Dr. Montunrayo, it's your turn.
Thank you very much for inviting me once again. Because our webinar is focused towards particular demographics, so the title of my talk is focused in that direction. So it's COVID-19 Canada, and we're looking at the Afro and racialized Canadian experience. And by way of introduction, we know that, at least from the news, that COVID-19 began to creep into our consciousness at the end of 2019. It was a novel virus which was identified as a cluster of pneumonia, identified in Wuhan, China, in the province of Hubei, began to spread rapidly throughout China through November. We didn't pay a lot of attention at the time. China itself did not seem to have involved WHO pretty early. It wasn't until February that it was designated a disease and given the name COVID-19. And the name of the virus itself was further was given the name acute respiratory syndrome corona 2 virus after the original SARS virus, which we had about a decade ago. It belongs to the beta coronavirus in the same subgenus as that original SARS virus. Now, the closest RNA sequence is similar to the bat virus and the coronavirus series. So one way to look at it is it's essentially a common cold, because coronaviruses have been with us for quite a long time. They're not new. They didn't start in 2019. We've had coronaviruses with us a long time ago. But the difference this time around is this particular brand of coronavirus can kill. And as we have seen, sometime this week, if we have not already reached it today, we are going to reach 20 million people that have been affected worldwide. And our local experience here in Canada is that about 9,000, almost 9,000 people have died, and we'll soon see the figures very soon. And it appears likely that bats are the primary source of this particular subgenus of virus. By way of transmission, we know that at this point in time, because our understanding of this virus is still evolving, it seems to be more of a direct person-to-person transmission, especially in a close range and close contact kind of environment via respiratory droplets. The viruses are released in respiratory secretions when an infected person coughs or sneezes or talks, and it can infect another person when infect another person when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, and when that other person makes a direct contact with the mucus, when the droplets makes a direct contact with the mucous membrane of others. Droplet contamination of hands after touching contaminated surfaces and then touching the lining of eyes, nostrils, or mouth is another means. And then there is also what we call aerosolization, that is spreading through things like sneezing beyond, anything beyond 6 feet is doubtful as a way of transmission. So it has to be within 6 feet or 2 meters for those who are into metric. So that's where the idea of the spacing and the physical spacing of 6 feet or 2 meters comes about. The virus is found in non-respiratory fluids like stool, like eye discharges and blood, but there's been no proven evidence of spread through these non-respiratory secretions. It is also doubtful that this is spread through broken skin. There is no evidence so far. There's been a lot of researches done, but we have not really found any evidence that it's spread this way. So it seems mucosal surfaces of the nose and the respiratory tract in general is where this transmission is happening at this point in time. The most common symptoms that we know of COVID-19 are fever, dry cough, tiredness, which of course may progress to difficulty with breathing when people who are most vulnerable develop pneumonia, especially in both lungs, which we find in people with comorbid illnesses like diabetes, and also, of course, as our seniors, people who are old age, renal diseases, and on and on. Symptoms may take up to 14 days to appear after exposure to COVID-19 virus itself. And there are less common symptoms like aches and pains, sore throats, diarrhea, conjunctivitis, which is inflammation of the lining of the eyes, headache, loss of taste or smell, a rash on skin or discoloration of fingers or even of the toes. But these are really non-specific, and as you can see, these are things that we find when people have common cold also. So really, at this point in time, anyone who has things that look like common cold or also running a fever and aches and pain becomes somebody that we should be suspicious of. and probably should be screened, and attention should be paid, especially in people who look like us, because we're the ones who are bearing the brunt of this illness, as I shall soon show us. Now, this is what COVID-19 looks like in Canada. About 120,000 people have been confirmed as having COVID-19 in Canada. As at Sunday night, more than 8,900 people have died. Over 103,000 people are dead, and we have about 7,000 active people who still have the disease. The good news, however, is the rate of new infections are beginning to be dialed down across Canada. Compared to our neighbors in the southern United States, we have been lucky, and we have a lot of things to thank God for. The numbers are there. They have had more than 5 million people, more than 165,000 people dead, and it's just looking very grim down there. And this is the breakdown by provincial statistics. We've tested almost 5 million people across Canada, and that's also the provincial breakdown of where most people have been tested. Ontario has led the pack with almost 2.4 million. That's about half of all the testing done across Canada has been done in Ontario alone. Now, if you look at this graph that you're seeing in front of you, that's a log graph of the way things have, the totality of the number of people that have been diagnosed across Canada. And if you look, that table is almost becoming a plateau, a flat graph. It's not exactly flat now, but it's pretty close. That means we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel here in Canada. And that's a good thing. And what we're looking at here is new case analysis by date. From that peak that you see there towards the end of April, again, it's been the number of new cases that we're seeing is dialing down pretty close. There's some new peaks towards the middle of July, but again, by and large, the numbers are dwindling down. That's also pretty good news. The blue color there is new cases on 7-day averages, and the pink is new cases by 3-day averages. And whether you're looking at 3-day averages or 7-day averages, the number is dwindling down. Again, that's good news for us here in Canada. And that's just the rate of new cases overall. And again, it's flattening out. So it's pretty good news for us in Canada. And this new graph here is just showing us the total number of cases. And that's the color you're seeing in orange there, confirmed. The green underneath is the number recovered, and underneath that's looking black there is the number of cases that are dead. Thankfully, that's flattened out, and as you can see, the number of recovered cases has increased, maybe because compared to early on in the cases, our knowledge has increased, the pick-up rate has also increased, and the number of people who are dying and succumbing to this disease has significantly increased. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. The Right Honorable Prime Minister says, our government is going to make sure that no matter where you live, what you do, or who you are, you're going to get the support you need during this time. So it means there is political will. After all, we're Canada, where there is multiculturalism and everybody has access to healthcare, or at least so it seems. The only problem is here in Canada, when COVID broke, we are not collecting data on race. No race-based data is collected. And whatever information we have are essentially extrapolated. It was only later, starting from about May, that Manitoba, Ontario, and I think Quebec decided to start collecting data that are race-based. So for a long time, we couldn't really tell which race communities are bearing the brunt of this pandemic. But if you look at that graph in front of you, this was extrapolated from the numbers in Toronto from public health, as well as public health agency, as well as the previous census of Canada. And what you're looking in front of you is, if you look towards your right, 48% of the residents of Toronto are white, but only 17% of patients with COVID are actually white. The rest are racialized Canadians, who represent only about 52%, but they represent 83% of the number of patients with COVID. Now that's not good. So 83% of the patients are either Black or people of other races. Now, for instance, in the Black population of Toronto, who represents only 9%, they actually they represent 21% of the number of COVID patients. The Latinos are only 3% of the population of Toronto, but they represent 10% of the COVID patients of Toronto as a whole. This is the burden that immigrants or Black Canadians are bearing. The white population, practically nothing. Now, of course, knowing this information means that resources must be directed to the places where the burden is greatest. Now, let's look at some of this other information. COVID-19 infection rates are significantly higher in the health regions with a higher percentage of Black residents. These are some of the information that we can derive from some of the figures that abound. It's because I don't have enough time. There are more graphs that I could show. We know that 1% point increase in the share of Black residents in the health regions around Ontario is associated with the doubling of coronavirus infection rates. And these figures are not just so for Toronto. We know it's the same in Quebec, where Quebec suffered a heavy rate of deaths and infection from COVID too, and same thing in British Columbia, and as well as in areas around Hamilton, Ontario, and places like that. A 1% point increase in the share of foreign-born residents is associated with a 3% rise in COVID-19 infection rates. And these are facts. Something else we know is when we looked at coronavirus and people identifying as Blacks in Toronto, if you look at that scatter plot, in areas like Danforth, Don Valley Parkway, Yonge, St. Clair, Bayview Village, Lansing, Westgate, Steeles, Little Portugal, that would be in those areas there. I don't know if you can see the areas I'm circling there. You will find out those are the places where most of the patients with COVID-19 diagnosis in Toronto were picked up. And as you begin to move away to places like Guildwood and Glenfield, Jane Heights and Umber Heights, Westmont, Weston and Mount Dennis, the cases begin to thin out. Again, the immigrant areas are the places where you have the heaviest amount of COVID-19 recognition. COVID-19 is not the great equalizer. Racial and economic disparities are very significant, and the analysis found strong association between high coronavirus rates and low income on the one hand, the condition of work, visible minority status, low levels of education, and certainly stronger association between neighborhoods with a high number of coronavirus cases and those with population of Black people. It's the same thing in the United States, same thing in England, where we've also looked at research coming forth on COVID-19. The other thing is, if you look at the kind of jobs that those of us in the Black community and immigrant community are involved in, we are the frontline healthcare workers. We work in healthcare and social assistance. We work in accommodation, food service, and manufacturing, in transportation and warehousing, administration support, waste management, wholesale trade. And so we are the ones who come in contact directly. We're the personal support workers and all these things. So here we are, we meet coronavirus and COVID-19 straight in the face. this is just a scatter plot looking at coronavirus and income. Same thing. The lower the income, the more you are susceptible to COVID-19. The higher your income, the less you are likely to come in contact with COVID-19. Question is, how do we prevent? What are the things we can do to prevent COVID-19? How can we protect ourselves? COVID-19 is caused by virus. At this point in time, social distancing is still what we have to do. Unfortunately, we are also the ones who live in congregate living. You know, we live in smaller spaces. We don't have we don't have the financial resource to live in 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet houses. So we have to do our best to not just social distance, make sure that the ventilation in the houses is adequate. Fortunately, we now live in the summer, so where you cannot social distance, we have to make sure we do diligent hand washing or use alcohol that has at least we have to use sanitizers with at least 60% or more alcohol. We have to practice respiratory hygiene, that is, make sure we cough in or sneeze into our sleeves, just like we've been told even before COVID-19 came about. Avoid touching the face or eyes so that we don't transmit COVID-19 all over ourselves. Cleaning and disinfecting objects. It's been shown that when you use the appropriate disinfecting objects, the surfaces will be disinfected of COVID-19 virus within a minute or two. Sunlight itself will disinfect it within 10 minutes. Ensure adequate ventilation. There should be cross ventilation. Thankfully, we're in the summer period now, so nobody is going to freeze from opening windows and opening doors so that the wind blows out any unnecessary viruses within the environment. So wearing masks in the community is pretty important. Wearing of non-medical masks when in public spaces where social and physical distancing is not feasible. That's the WHO and the CDC guideline. If you don't need to go to church, these days we can do church. I know many of us who are from Africa, we're very religious. So church and mosque and religious things are pretty important to us. So, but we can do these things online. And if church is packed to the brim, stay at home. God can listen to you wherever you are. So we've got to remember that. And if you really need to be in that place, then wear your mask. Avoid non-essential traveling because the risk of travel is changing rapidly. So make sure you go online and see what the new recommendations are. And I hear right now that some of the airlines are going to insist on mask wearing, or you'll have to provide a letter from your doctor to tell them why you are not wearing a mask. And early identification of cases. So if you know a neighbor, if you know a friend, if you know a family member who is sick, tell them to go get checked and get tested very early so that isolation of the one who is sick is done pretty early. The sooner we identify and isolate, the better, not just for ourselves, but for everybody in that family and indeed everybody in our community. So that we don't spread the disease to those who are more vulnerable, especially the elderly, among the elderly and the very sick in our midst. I'm going to stop here for now for my colleague. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and good evening to the audience. I bring you good tidings from the United States. I think my video is hooked up in the air. It was very good introduction and review by Dr. Montunrayo. I enjoyed watching and listening to him. It's always been great. And you're going to be hearing about the same thing he says because COVID is the disease nobody knows anything about. You know, we know a lot, but there's still a lot we don't know. So we'll be talking about this disease from different angles, but we'll be saying the same thing. And I have some And I appreciate the time to share with you some of our personal experience and what is known. Can I have my first slide, please? In America, we like to show off. The Russians don't do nothing. They just do, they don't show. But in America, we do more sensational. I just highlight this slide to show you a cross-section of individuals, men and women, working overtime behind the scenes, not on TV, not on advertisement, and not politicking, who are spending their time working on understanding this disease, the phenomenon, how it's affecting human beings, how we can track it down, and how we can navigate treatment and cure in an American society that is different from most societies. Next slide. In terms of worldwide epidemiology, this slide is 3 days old. I can add more numbers. The total number of cases worldwide is about 20-something million people have been affected, out of which about 740,000 are dead. In Africa, we know the story. They are reporting 1 million. I would say you multiply that number by 4 to be realistic. They're reporting 1 million cases and they are claiming 22,000 deaths. And I challenge that number is not accurate. In Asia, that includes China. They're reporting 5 million with 105,000 deaths. And America's 10 million cases with 386,000 deaths. Europe and Oceania States. Next slide, please. The next one. And as Dr. Montero talked about, Canada is a very lucky place. I like to move over there next week. The trend in anywhere but Canada is up, 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 and not down, 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 down. And we can have different explanations why the numbers are trending up, both the diagnosis, the death, the reinfection, and the testing. Next slide. If you choose the United States, we now have 6 million, more than 6 million cases, and 165,000 deaths. And I can tell you, though, that there are about 65 million people tested. So as you look at the numbers briefly, you can see that we tested the most, we reported the most deaths, and we reported the highest number of cases. If you look at if you do the math, it's a disease that has 4% incident rate. And the mortality is about anywhere from 0% to about 5%, depending on the time interval, the first 3 months, the first 6 weeks, the last 2 weeks. But at the end of the day, we are seeing more cases because we are doing more testing, and also because we are not uniform in observing the only treatment we know about this disease, which is wash your hand, wear a mask, don't touch your face and mouth. Next slide. In terms of racial disparity, if you look at death per 100,000, Black Americans and Black Africans and Black all over, please go back, thank you, account for the most. 22% of people who died afflicted with the disease worldwide is Black. And it's the same thing in England. I know in the first few months of this episode, we were the amount of, or the number of people of color, of minority dying in England is the same rate as in the United States. You look at it, you say that 65% of those who've succumbed to the disease are either Black, Hispanic, or non-white Americans. The pure white Americans, about 25%, and the rest of them are non-white. Next slide, please. So the doctor did a good job in explaining the transmission. I just want to put a picture on it. And you should see the human being kind of oozing it out. It's a disease of the air. It's a big chunk of globulate stuff that's carried as a droplet by the air. And the velocity of transmission is too bad. So if you look at singing, speaking, coughing, and sneezing, and you can see the bullet point. The sneezing, because it has higher velocity, takes the bug farther away. So that when they say 6 feet, 6 feet is not enough in the form of the sneezes. Cough is close by, and then singing and speaking are within the 6 feet. Next slide. So how does that happen? So if you look, the bug is a combination of seriously, there's some part of the anatomy that looks like HIV virus, but then it has these spikes and spokes around them, and this spike is called the S protein, and this spike, the S protein hangs around the blood of the tissue and hangs around to that green stuff called the soluble ACE2 site. The soluble S gene, which is the most important thing you want to know today, allows that, hooks up into the spike and drags it up to the surface of the membrane. That surface could be your eyes, your mouth, or anything, any part of the body that's vulnerable. It is from there, through the nose, through the mouth, or through the eyes, that the organism gets into the body and then attaches to the ACE body, the ACE. From there, they can generate an antibody, which is, we can come about and talk about for the cure. But the ACE, you'll see more why this is important. The ACE receptor is the predominant mechanism through which the organism flows from somewhere into your body and begins to cause havoc. Next slide. All right. So this is a busy one. So it is attachment and entry, the receptor, and the virus gets into the body, attracts the DNA and RNA of your body and takes over, and the cascade of regeneration and the assault of the body continues. Next slide, please. There you go. On top of the slide are the kidneys, followed by the lungs by the side, and down to the heart, the iris of the liver, and the brain and the intestine. Folks, these organisms, these areas you see, are where the ACE gene are most concentrated. And they describe the areas in the body that this organism causes the most harm. By colluding with the ACE gene in any of these parts of the body, an inflammatory response will occur. That inflammatory response is called cytokine storm, which in the lungs causes almost like somebody's drowning. The fluids, the liquids. If you look at our experience in our hospital, the first 4 patients we lost actually died because we couldn't get enough crap out of their lungs. And it's called pruning. Pruning is where you lay their face down and you put a bucket and the fluid from the lungs just drail. This is an incredible experience that I never thought I'd see in my life. And it's not, they don't die because the lungs don't work. They die because of this liquefied fluid that overcomes and overpowers the function of the organ. In the heart, they intercept the electrical conduction, causing the arrhythmias. They also cause some blockage, so that clot forms in the heart. They overtake the muscle architecture of the heart, so there's a heart block. And in the kidneys, they shut the kidney down. Almost 90% of our patients have low kidney function because they inhibit the function of the kidney. In the brain, they form some clots. In the lungs, they form clots. So the most common cause of death in these people are blood clots all over, the heart stops, or the lungs is overcome with liquid. In the stomach, the bowel, because the bowel is over 100 feet, they do the best they can to intercept the action of the bowel, and they have diarrhea. So they have worrying stools, smelly, worry, and it's a historic year to say the least. It's been a privilege to go through what we see here, but alarming and just frightening. But that's the story. Glad we can talk about it today. Next slide, please. So as a consequence of that, as the other doctor mentioned, you have the pneumonia, which is, you see, the thing is that the mistake, not the mistake, the knowledge we had before, which may have accounted for some of the deaths, is that the X-ray looks like that of HIV. The X-ray looks like somebody had PCP. So we treat them as ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, where the X-ray looks like they're puffy, they feel of water. They used to be filled with water in infections, so the antibiotics worked. In this, we thought it was the same, so we put them on the respirator, high flow pressure, and it didn't make much difference eventually as we learned more. So it's a very teaching example. So the stacks, you see the young man trying to push against 1, 2, 3, 4 things. The stack is like constitutional symptoms of fever. Fever is from the toxemia. GI symptoms talk about diarrhea. Thromboembolic, that's very important. We make sure that they are on blood thinner. The kidney failure we explained. The cardiovascular injuries we talked about, and the strokes and everything else. Next slide, please. What makes this virus so unique? Why? Because the multiplying number is high. If you have the common flu, and let's say you have 5 kids, I got 4, and I remember one of them will bring on, they come home with some flu from school. It doesn't affect me, most of the time it affects the mom, because I always go to mom. But other siblings are free. So there's always like 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 combination. This thing here is in the power of, you can't name it. You see that first guy in red, you see what he gave birth to, almost like 8 or 13 people. So one person can translate it to 13 people. Next slide, let's see if I get it. Next slide. There you go. So number 1, number 2, okay, great. So the number 1 reason is that high transmission. Number 2 reason is the worst, is why even innocent souls like you and I may get it, no matter what you try to do. I don't want to discourage you or give you the sense of doom, but you can do the best you can and still succumb, because it's difficult to prevent disease by the air. Look at that. If that drop is left on a surface, it's aerosol in the air, it can hang around the air for 3 hours. How do we know? We've had patients die in a quarantine room of COVID, and we collect the air, and within 3 hours, the COVID is still in the air. So what does that mean? In the elevator, that somebody with the COVID who did not wear a mask is, and you enter there without a mask, you might get it within 3 hours. So it makes the fact that you must cover your face, you must cover your nose, you must cover your mouth in your elevator if it's not in your house, because you don't know who the last person was. In our hospital, we have 2 elevators, and they will rate on them COVID. That's why nobody uses them, because they use them to bring patients with COVID to a specialized place. But that's important. But then on the copper surface is up to 4 hours. On a cardboard, 24 hours. So that's why if you go to grocery and have the plastic bag, they tell you leave it out for a couple of days, because that thing can be alive waiting to grab somebody's ACE gene and get into their body for up to days. So 5 minutes? Okay. And then, okay, so number 3, next slide, please. Number 3 is placed by the hands. You can see the hands, the eyes, and the next one. And the next one, important, is the density. Remember we talked about ACE receptor is the density. So why is it the people who have the highest density have the highest mortality initially? Who are those? Diabetics, old folks, hypertensive, black people, chronic lung disease, and asthma. So if you see, okay, he was 45 years old, he died. He had asthma or something, or diabetes, because the lab read this diabetes. By the way, even though we have 165,000 deaths in the country, 70% of them are over the age of 70 years old. So the older you are, the more vulnerable. because of this density of that. And then, okay, next slide, please. Next slide, next slide. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, okay. So now let's go to management strategies. We talked about ventilator and oxygen. The only thing I can say about that is ventilators are minimally used. There was a time we have 30 ventilators. Now we have 2 ventilators. But we know about oxygen and electrolyte management and pruning. Antiviral drugs, remdesivir, for this drug, all you need to know is that for every 10 people given the drug, of the 10 people who survived, 3 of them will go home 3 days earlier. So as a matter of fact, it's a big hoopla for something, just gives us a hope. It's not a cure, it reduces the thing. I think the most important thing it might do is if we can give it early with the first diagnosis, it might prevent hospitalization. Hydroxychloroquine is a questionable drug. I think it's more politics than reality, unfortunately. There may be some use with hydroxychloroquine, but the politics is blurring it through. So we do not officially recommend hydroxychloroquine for anything, even though I must tell you, because that is true. A lot of my colleagues here and overseas are still giving people hydroxychloroquine as an outpatient. But officially, we advise physicians not to use it. We use it internally initially, but we don't use it anymore. Monoclonal antibodies, plasma, convalescent plasma is under investigation, but we like it, it works. The anti-inflammatory drugs. The key one is number 4, the heparin, the Eliquis. Very important drug because most of the mortality occurs from people who have blood clots. So we always give them something to thin their blood. And then ACE inhibitor therapy, we know that this organism use the ACE gene. So if they're on blood pressure medicine before and it's on lisinopril or ACE, please keep the drug on them. The plasma, again, is very good. If people who have the disease, you collect their blood and go from there. And on the next slide is how they work. I'll leave that for you. Next slide, please. In terms of vaccine, I have to tell you that the world over is into vaccine. The UK, the government funded partly Oxford and AstraZeneca. United States government get the money, and Pfizer has their own, and Moderna has their own. I think based on what I know, that by the end of the year, if not before that, I have 2 patients enrolled in the vaccine trial and they're all doing well. I think that by the end of the year, we'll have 2 or 3 companies with good out. And that was the news out today, I have to say that, from Russia, where the president said that he developed one, he gave it to his child. The whole world, the scientific world has a pinky eye to that claim. But we really don't care where the drug comes from. If it works, we should be able to, at the timing, study the outcome. Next slide, please. All right, so that's, I'm glad I finished on time. So in summary, this is a disease that we've never known before. It acts like HIV, it acts like coronavirus, it acts a lot of stuff. But what we know today is that 3 things that work. Those are wash your hands, wear the mask that covers your nose, your mouth, and your face. Sanitize yourself, keep distance. Allow everybody in the community where you have to have a mask. The regular mask protects that person from giving it to somebody else. It does not protect the person wearing it. So everybody wears that little mask, everybody will be okay.
Good evening, everyone. I believe you can hear me and you can probably see me, but to hear me is the most important one. My name is Ibuku Ogunshino, and I'm so happy to be here tonight. I want to say thank you to Dr. Adetola and Dr. Leo. I just graduated from medical school. Just listening to the 2 of you. Thank you so much. And Mrs. Adetola and Rowena, thank you so much for having me on board tonight. So my name once again is Ibuku Ogunshino, and I'm a registered psychotherapist and also a Christian counselor. I'm a mom, a wife, and a daughter to the Most High God. So I'm here tonight to share briefly on some coping strategies, that you can make use of. Probably, of course, you've been making use of all the coping strategies since we've been cocooned in our homes since March, But hey, I'm here tonight to share more of such strategies. and also to share some skills for protecting your children from COVID-19. And finally, I'm going to touch a little bit on some emotion regulation skills. Truth be told, this pandemic is unprecedented. It has never happened like this before. We are fully aware that many people are affected. And to tell the truth, it is extremely stressful for parents, especially. Families have been cocooned to their homes for months on end. Parents have been faced with the stress of juggling their day-to-day responsibilities while also caring for their children at home. Parents are also helping their kids understand and cope with the different changes to their daily routines due to social distancing, while working from home and homeschooling at the same time. And now, to add to what's going on, there's a new wave of anxiety that some people are struggling with, and that is the resumption of students in September. Some parents are okay with sending their kids to school, while some are not. So this brings me to my next slide, and that's where you have that, next slide, okay. That's where you have the quote that I shared by Otto Ashe, that popular American tennis player. He once shared that when you find yourself in a situation where you have to make a decision on what to do, start where you are. Use what you have and do what you can. So with respect to a lot of things going on, refrain from succumbing to peer pressure. Do you. If you're okay with sending your kids to school in September, do. If not, stay at home. See, the situation is different for everyone. However, the good news is that since the pandemic started, you and I, we have all been making use of different strategies, whether healthy or unhealthy. Our own way of coping has been helping to keep us afloat. And tonight, I'm going to focus on a few more strategies that can encourage you to stay afloat. So please join me as I go on to my next slide. So you can see there's some things that you can control and there's some things that you cannot control. So looking at that, I will encourage parents here tonight listening to me to continue to be role models. You know, I know that parents are under immense stress, but they are also encouraged to be models of calm and peace. We encourage you, even as therapists in this world, to remain as tranquil as possible. It will be harder for your kids to stay calm if the adults around them are stressed out. I know you're not used to what is going on now. You're working from home, the kids are running around, you're supposed to keep an eye on them, yes. Some parents are getting to the ends of their ropes easily nowadays, and I do understand. However, maybe you're called to be parents for such a time as this. So please just continue to be role models. Just try. And in trying to remain calm, there's a skill that I'd like you to look at. It is called the radical acceptance skill. It's a dialectical behavioral therapy skill. This is a skill where you acknowledge your reality, where you may not condone what is going on. You may actually not be on the same page with what has happened or what is happening. However, you just simply acknowledge what is going on and accept it, because fighting reality only intensifies our emotional reaction. So radical acceptance has nothing to do with being passive or giving up. On the contrary, it's about channeling your energy into moving on. That is a skill that you can actually look up. You can Google radical acceptance. If you want more information about it, you can give your therapist a call and book a session to know more about radical acceptance skill. Second point that I'd like to share with some parents listening tonight is to encourage you to promote family time. Set a day aside to enjoy a movie together as a family and even as a couple. Host movie nights in your sitting room and let down your hairs for once. Oh yes, the house will be dirty. There will be popcorn on the carpet, but the kids will have fun. Your children will they will continue to have memories of them having fun during the pandemic. Right now, I want you to try and visualize the stories your children will tell your grandchildren one day about this year. So in all you're doing, in all your business, try and have movie nights. In my family, we do that most Sunday on Sunday nights. We just log on to Netflix, and we don't feel guilty about doing so. Love on each other. Now, the third one is to set appropriate boundaries by limiting your exposure to social media in general. Oh, yes. You want to know what is going on. It is essential for you to stay informed. Information is empowering, but too much information has the opposite effect, and it can be overwhelming as well. Do you actually need a constant flow of information? Giving yourself some news-free days can curb the urge to panic and help you keep things in perspective. You have to learn to set emotional, physical, intellectual boundaries where necessary. You won't miss out on any important news just because you're unplugged for an hour or an afternoon or even a day. You'll actually be doing yourself a favor. Now talking about wellness, how to improve wellness. We encourage parents to refrain from being overwhelmed by sharing chores at home. Don't do it alone. Even if you have small kids, encourage them to do something, no matter how small. Yes, most parents are working from home, so please set appropriate boundaries around your tasks. For you to improve your emotional wellness, reach out to a trusted friend. Discuss a particular situation with someone that you can trust. I subscribe to the adage that a problem shared is half solved. To improve intellectual awareness, ask yourself, when was the last time you set time aside to read that novel or that magazine? That will help you. Finally, to improve your spiritual wellness, I love the spirituality is about connecting with what's meaningful to you in a way that lightens or enriches your spirit. Spiritual wellness can bring comfort and healing when handling stress. You can actually go for a walk. For others, you can practice kindness, gratitude, or faith in a higher being. What brings each person's spiritual wellness is unique and individual. Ask yourself, what feeds my soul? Finally, you can see that self-care wheel. If you can't see it, you can actually Google self-care wheel once we're done. It's available on Google. It's a wheel that is divided into 6 different sections. And each section will give you different activities that you can do to maintain a good life balance. So ask yourself, what is self-care? Self-care is anything you do to be good to yourself. Self-care is taking care of yourself. It's about pampering yourself. It's about being compassionate to you. When was the last time you took the time to pamper yourself? Studies show that regular exercise can help to reduce anxiety and build your tolerance for stress. Look for opportunities to fit exercise into your day, not the ones you're being forced to do so. Find time to exercise, do yoga. Don't be shy to binge on Netflix movies. Do massage, tell your husband to massage your back. Do it with love. Note that you are essential and your personal needs matter. So, and that will take me to my next slide. And that's when I'll discuss briefly what's going on with how to protect our children. Truth be told, so many children are bored at home right now. And some are actually afraid and they're bothered about going back to school in September. Some parents are as well. So What are the strategies that you can actually put into place to protect them? It's time for you to actually ask your children to sit down, and it's time for you to talk to them. Be gentle with them. Please go back. There's a slide before this one. Yeah, this one. It's okay, you can leave it like that. It's time for you to talk to your kids about coronavirus. Be gentle with them. Sit them down. You might actually say, we haven't had a chance to talk about what's going on, and it's time for you to go back to school. Do you have any questions? And if they do have questions, validate their emotions. Let them know as their parents that you have their backs. You're doing your best to keep them safe. Don't forget to educate them on how they can also help by asking them to always make sure that they wash their hands, just like Dr. Leo and Dr. Adetola shared. Maintaining a social distance of about 6 meters and staying home with their family as well. Let them know that we are all in this together. And if they have questions, don't be in a hurry. I am guilty of that. Sometimes my kids do like, Mom, we want to ask you something. And I'm like, okay, I'm cutting plantains and I'm listening to you. No, sometimes they want our undivided attention. Validate their emotions. Go deeper, say, that's a good question. A couple of nights ago, I actually called my 9-year-old boy. And I said, sweetheart, just come and tell me about your TikTok video. Some of the things he was telling me, I had no clue. But I pretended as if I was listening. So the last slide will take me to the emotion regulation skills. And that is, it's the process of controlling your emotions, keeping them in balance and away from extremes. Whatever you do, whether focusing on positive events like having an unrushed meal, listening to music, going for a brief walk, all these things will be able to help you to regulate your emotions better. I wish I had more time, but I want you to know that we'll always be here. If you feel like talking to anyone, also reach out to a trusted family friend that would be objective and not subjective, that will be able to listen to you. And that's where I will drop my hat tonight. My name is Ibukum Kushina again. Thank you for having me.
Amazing, Mrs. Ogushina. Thank you so much. On behalf of Women Focus Canada and the Canadian Red Cross Society, I would like to thank you all for taking this time to attend this first webinar series. COVID-19 has pushed us to our limits and continues to bring challenges in different areas of our lives. However, we are hopeful that COVID-19 will also bring unique opportunities to all of us. We encourage you to register for all of our webinars. We want to thank you again. God bless you. Keep safe.